George, an affable, middle-aged man with a heart full of courage, had taken up the role of a graveyard keeper at the Whispering Pines Cemetery 5 years ago. To many, the idea of spending nights alone in a cemetery would be horrifying, but George had learned to find peace in the silent companionship of those whose earthly journey had ended. His day had started ordinarily. The sun rose, streaming rays of golden light through his apartment window. He enjoyed a simple breakfast of black coffee and toast while flipping through the local newspaper, his eyes lingering on the obituaries, a reminder of the transience of life. A morning walk around the park with his golden retriever Duke was a beloved ritual. The day passed uneventfully as he attended to house chores, read a few chapters of his new thriller novel, and watched a comedy movie on TV. Laughter echoed through his apartment, the cheeriness in stark contrast to the solemnity of his job. As twilight settled, George prepared for his shift. He dressed in his uniform, the dark fabric seeming to absorb the encroaching night. Before leaving, he gave Duke a pat and a treat, his departure met with a whine from his loyal companion. As he arrived at the graveyard, the silence of the night welcomed him. He began his initial rounds, his heavy boots imprinting on the dewy grass. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and lingering traces of floral tributes. He could hear the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl, night's troubadour. Once satisfied with his patrol, he retreated to the office. It was small, yet warm, a cozy space packed with shelves of aging records, a worn-out desk, and a security monitor. He sank into his chair, letting out a soft sigh as he began his vigil. His first hour was spent in leisure, browsing his phone. He smiled at memories shared by friends, chuckled at a video of a clumsy kitten, and rolled his eyes at the endless chain of corny jokes. Outside, the graveyard remained a static tableau of peace, disturbed only by the odd scurry of a small creature. Then, a shadowy blur darted across the camera feed, drawing his attention. His mind rationalized it as a deer, or perhaps a fox, exploring the graveyard's solitude. He shrugged it off, returning to his phone. But when it happened again, he frowned, wondering if it could be a mischievous local attempting a late-night dare. Deciding to investigate, he armed himself with a flashlight and walked towards the camera's location. The cool wind whispered through the tombstones, the flickering beam of his light making the shadows dance ominously. Suddenly, a human cry shattered the night's tranquility. "Help, please!" The desperation in the voice sent a chill down George's spine, accelerating his pace. Fear took root in his heart. He called out into the darkness, "Who's there? Show yourself!" But only the wind answered his plea. As George turned the corner around the imposing granite tombstone, he found himself face to face with a figure cloaked in the murky shadows of the night. His heart pounded against his ribs like a war drum. He was about to ask the stranger's intentions when the figure lunged, his move as swift and lethal as a predator's strike. Caught off guard, George tried to dodge, but it was too late. The flashlight slipped from his grasp and twirled through the air, its beam creating erratic patterns on the ancient gravestones. The impact of the figure's body hit him like a freight train, sending him sprawling backward onto the cold, damp earth. His breath whooshed out of his lungs, replaced by a gasp of surprise and fear. The scuffle was fierce, a dance of survival under the watchful eyes of the silent tombstones. George's hands grappled in the darkness, his fingers clawing at the attacker's clothing, desperate for something to hold on to. The figure was strong, his grip like iron bands around George's wrists. He could feel the uneven surface of the tombstone against his back, its coldness seeping through his uniform, mirroring the chill that was spreading through his body. Panic rose like bile in his throat, but he forced it down, knowing he needed every ounce of concentration to fight back. He felt a sharp pain in his side. His mind barely registered what was happening before another stabbing pain followed, stronger this time, filling his senses with a blinding white-hot flare. His attempts to resist weakened as a warm liquid spread across his abdomen. A cold realization washed over him. He had been stabbed. Each following strike was a symphony of pain. His breath hitched as he tried to suck in air. The world around him began to blur, shadows coalescing into indistinguishable shapes. A ringing started in his ears, muffling the sounds of the night, the rustling leaves, the far-off hoot of the owl. His attacker's face loomed in his fading vision, a shapeless mask shrouded in the darkness. There was no mercy in those eyes, only a wild, fervent energy that was terrifying to behold. Finally, the pain subsided, replaced by a numbness that was somehow worse. His body felt heavy, as if he was sinking into the earth beneath him. George tried to hold on, to claw back from the abyss that was pulling him in, but the darkness was relentless. His life didn't flash before his eyes, as the old cliché goes. Instead, there was just the cold, the darkness, and the sound of his heartbeat slowing in his ears. The final thing George felt was the cold hand of his attacker upon his face, the touch almost a mockery of a comforting caress. Then, the world faded to nothingness, leaving the cemetery in a silence that was now even deeper. As dawn broke, Sam, the daytime manager, arrived to an unnerving scene. The sight of George's lifeless body sprawled on the cold ground would forever be etched in his memory. The echo of his frantic 911 call seemed to hang heavy in the air, as the silence of the morning was replaced by the frenzied activity of police officers and forensic experts. Detective Rourke, a seasoned officer with a weathered face and deep-set eyes, was the first on the scene. He knelt next to George's lifeless form, a grim expression etched on his face as he examined the chilling scene. While the officers erected a barrier around the area, the technicians worked diligently, combing through the crime scene. Yet the only significant find was the haunting footage from the security camera. An obscured face, a ritualistic dance, and an eerie silence following the brutal act. Meanwhile, news of the horrific event had reached town, sending shivers of fear down the spines of Whispering Pines residents. Stories began to circulate, whispers of the graveyard being cursed, of spectral apparitions haunting its visitors. Fearful mothers held their children a little closer, and men started traveling in groups after sundown. As days turned into weeks, the police struggled to find a lead. The cemetery, once a symbol of peaceful rest, was now a chilling reminder of George's brutal end. Flowers of condolence started piling at the entrance gate, a silent tribute to the man who had once walked these grounds every night, ensuring their peace. While the sun still shone every day, a shadow seemed to hang over Whispering Pines, a grim testament to the night George lost his life. The town, and especially the cemetery, would never be the same again. As for Duke, he lay patiently by the front door every night, waiting for the sound of his master's footsteps. But the man he had eagerly waited for would never walk through the door again. The faithful dog was a silent mourner of George, the kind-hearted graveyard keeper who fell prey to the horrors of the night. Life moved on, but the memory of George's untimely demise remained, a chilling tale recounted in hushed whispers, a ghost story that was far too real. When you subscribe, be sure to click the notification bell. Click here for more true scary stories.